Right, hello there ladies and gents, welcome to another repair video. Today we're going to be looking at this PlayStation 4 Slim, which has been sent in. And this console's been sent in because it's got no power. So we're going to take a look, see what we can do, and hopefully get it fixed. But while I've got your attention, if you are new to the channel and you like this type of content, then I would really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and turn on the bell notifications, and that way you don't miss any future videos. Also I want to point out that I do have a bit of a swollen eye. I was working in my loft earlier on this week and I've developed, I think, sinusitis. So a little bit of a swollen eye, so just ignore that. I'm usually a lot more beautiful. But if you do feel sorry for me, then you can head over to Twitch and you can become a Twitch Prime subscriber by linking your Amazon Prime account, and then basically you can become a subscriber for free, which gives me around about $2.50 every month. So with that being said, let's get into this repair, shall we? Alright, so as you can see, we've got the PlayStation 4 here, and I'm going to hook up some power. There we go. And if I turn on the console, or attempt to turn on the console, we've got no power or response from the power buttons at all. So there's nothing at all happening with the console. I'm going to try and offer up a disc and see if it does it that way, because potentially it could be a power button issue. And that's just typical. Every time these fail, they fail with a disc in them. So no option to do that. So typically when the PlayStation 4 Slim loses power, it's down to a couple of things. It can be down to the power supply, but this has come from a company called Console Repair London, who basically send me the stuff that they can't fix, and basically they try the power supply generally before they send it over this way. So they don't usually send me the simple ones where it's just a power supply replacement, but I can test that. I can see if we've got any 5-volt output, which would be for standby, but I don't think it's going to be the power supply because it's been sent from there. The main reason, if it's not the power supply, is generally down to the south bridge. So the south bridge is a chip on the motherboard which is responsible for pretty much all input and output devices. So it's responsible for USB ports, the power button, some power rails, the disk drive, the Ethernet and other things like that. Some of the HDMI circuits such as the 5-volt and the hot plug detect, I think, run through there as well. So it's responsible for quite a lot. It's pretty much the most important chip next to the APU and the RAM. So basically without that we get nothing. So we've got no life at all, and even if we leave it plugged in, nothing at all happening. So let's take it apart and let's see what's going on. So we'll start by taking off the top cover, and this is the antenna-less model, or rather the one without the antenna on the power supply here, which is absolutely fine. I'm going to take my brand new 4th iFixit kit. I keep losing the bits, which is why there's bits just randomly all over the place. I'm going to make a pact to myself right now, and that's to put the screwdrivers back once I've finished with them, because I keep losing them. I'm going to take a spare screwdriver, and I'm going to put in a PH0 and a T8 security bit, and that should be all we need to get into this. I'm going to make a pact to actually put them back once I've finished with them in future. I'm sick of buying these kits, to be honest. It's usually the magnetic bit which I lose for some reason. I've lost the magnetic bit to every single iFixit kit that I've got, to be honest. But I must remember to keep the lid on it, because otherwise it'll just get stuck somewhere and I'll never find it again. But never mind. So what I'm going to do then, I'm going to take out these screws here, so as I can start to take it apart, but I'm also going to just test the 5-volt rail and also see if we've got any power going to the power button at all. So there's a couple of ways that we can test this without having to worry about whether or not the power button works. So what I might do is short out the power button, just so as we can override that power button and eliminate that as a possibility for no power. A lot of the times when the power button fails, it's generally down to a little bit of a liquid spill. These are fairly resilient in terms of liquid, but you do find it sometimes, and it's usually around the power button area. Alright, so a little bit of dust, nothing too major. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just test this area here and just see if we've got any kind of power going through there. So I'll plug in my power cable, and then I'm going to test it at the button just to see if we've got any voltage. So I'm going to find a ground point. Just there will do. And I can't remember which one I actually need it on there, but there we go. We've got 3.2 volts there. And if I touch the ground point and the point where I'm probing, so the positive, if I touch those together, that's basically going to replicate me pressing the power button. We've got 3.3 volts on both the power button and the eject button there, so it's definitely not going to be a power button issue, because that should turn on when I touch those leads together. So you see when the voltage drops there, that's because I'm shorting out that button to ground and basically replicating me pressing the power button. So we're getting 3.3 volts, which is normal. So I'm going to take a wild stab in the dark here and say that we've got a south bridge issue, because if we've got 3.3 volts there, then we've likely got 5 volts here on the power supply 5 volt connector. We'll take this apart and just see what goes on. I'll fast forward through this bit. And while I'm doing that, I want to give a shout out to a couple of people. So I want to give a shout out to two very, very helpful and very, very generous people who have really helped out this channel over the past year. I've been kind of reflecting on the channel's growth over the past year, or over the past 12 months or so, and if it wasn't for two very important people, then none of this would have happened. I would have probably still been on around about 10,000 subscribers, and basically they made it happen. They made me get to almost 30,000. So two very important people. The first one, a big thank you for all of the support to my mate Vince. Genuinely, that guy is an absolute legend. If it wasn't for him, I would have never got to even 5,000 subscribers. Or, well, I would have done, but not in the time frame that I got to it at. And the second one is Steve from Tronics Fix. So Steve from Tronics Fix is an absolute legend. He sent me a motherboard just over a year ago, and basically, if it wasn't for that particular motherboard, that particular repair, then, you know, the channel wouldn't have gained an extra 10,000 subscribers, which was absolutely unbelievable. So Steve and my mate Vince, honestly, absolute legends. Go check them out. They are genuinely nice people, and they do some really interesting content as well, so I think you'll really enjoy it. There'll be links to their channels in the video description, but I would really appreciate it if you go check them out, because they are genuinely nice people. So I'll fast forward through the rest of this bit. While I'm doing that, feel free to go and check those guys out. Right, okay then, so here we are. We've got the top off, so we're ready to do some more tests. So I'm going to plug the power cable back in now. And you'll have to excuse the background noise, there's some work going on next door. So there's a little bit of banging going on. Alright, so I want to test for a 5 volt supply just here. So I'm going to pop one probe on ground again. I'm in voltage mode, by the way. And I'm going to test this pin just here. And 4.77 volts. That's got a little bit of voltage drop there. That's it's a little bit strange. There's a little bit of voltage drop. So these leads are brand new, which means there shouldn't really be any resistance. If we check out in resistance mode, the resistance between these 2 points, yeah, we've got a 0 ohms resistance, 0.1 ohms. So there shouldn't be that much voltage drop across the 5 volt line, which is kind of strange. So 4.78 volts, that's, you know, 0.23 volts drop across the 2 points. Yeah, that's not quite normal. So that's telling me that there's an issue somewhere on the south bridge. So the south bridge is on the other side of the board just here, so we can test that from this side. This is the area directly underneath the south bridge, and what we can do, first of all, I need to just unplug the power supply there, so make sure that your power supply is unplugged, because otherwise you're going to get false readings. And if we go into continuity mode and pop one probe on ground, then we can test this area here for shorts. And yes indeed, that area is short. So we shouldn't have shorts all around here. There are some low impedance lines, which means that it would show up short anyway, but we shouldn't have this many shorts. Yeah, that's definitely shorted. So this side here appears to be ground. As you can see there, it's shorted. So we've got a short on the south bridge. Okay. So these, like I said, are brand spanking new leads, so there shouldn't be any kind of voltage drop across there, and we do get a small drop across the 5-volt line. So a little bit strange. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take out the motherboard, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt a reflow on the south bridge. That does work sometimes, but sometimes you have to replace it. I think this is the CXD9004-2GG, the part number for the south bridge on this. I'm almost sure it is. It's either the 4.2 or the 4.6, but I'm pretty sure it's the 4.2. So I'm going to take out this pretty tight power supply cable there, and then I'm going to flip it around, and I'm going to remove the, just unclip that, and we're ready to get the motherboard out. So this is the SAF006, and yep, it's the 4.2 GG. Okay, GG stands for game over, because at the minute this board is kind of game over. Alright, well, never mind. We'll do our best to get it working. So I'm going to pop under the scope and I'll show you what I'm going to do next. Okie doke, so yep, like I said, this is the 4.2 GG. Ignore that little bit of what looked like liquid there. It's not actually liquid, it's something off the thermal pad that's on the chassis. So don't worry about that, it's not actually liquid damaged, but the south bridge has definitely failed. So what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to attempt a reflow on this. So what a reflow means is basically I'm going to heat the chip up until the solder becomes molten underneath the chip, because this is basically a BGA, so it stands for ball grid array. So the solder underneath the chip is in the form of solder balls, and I need to heat up the entire chip until all of those solder balls are molten. And if there are any kind of issues with the south bridge, then typically that will fix it. But if it don't, then I'm going to need to take it off and I'm going to need to replace it. So what that will mean is I'll need to take one from a donor board and reball it. So that's not going to be fun, but it is a job which is possible with a little bit of patience. I don't actually own a stencil for these south bridge chips, but I suck with stencils anyway, so I do it all by hand. So hopefully I haven't got to do that. It's quite cold at the minute, so my flux is not coming out of the syringe very well. So what I'm going to do is just warm it up using the hot air station. I'm just going to warm my flux up. And it should come out a little bit easier now. There we go, that's better. So flux tends to harden up when it goes cold. It's always best to warm it up first before you use it. And unfortunately this is going to be the best view that I can get, because the chip is fairly big and it doesn't quite fit under the microscope. So sadly this is going to be the best view I'm going to be able to get for you guys. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some hot air at 420 degrees Celsius, and that's at an airflow of 40%. I'm using the Atten ST862D. You should be able to use around about the same settings on a quick hot air station, but it would be different if you've got a different machine. So, but I'm using 420 because these chips are quite sensitive to heat. So I want to try and do this as safely as I can. But what I'm going to do is just heat this up, and what's going to happen is the flux underneath the chip is going to basically start to push itself under as the chip starts to heat up, and that's going to tell me roughly when it's going to be ready to actually reflow. You can see the flux is bubbling a little bit, and it's very close to being reflowed. So I'm going to come in and start trying to tap the chip. So what you saw there was basically the chip moving out of position and then pulling itself back, and that's the effect of something called surface tension. So surface tension is basically going to pull the chip back in as long as we don't push it too far out of line and keep the chip in position. But by doing that, it tells me that all of the balls are molten and that the reflow has finished. So I'm just going to clean up a little bit here. Just get rid of some of this flux off the board. So I'm not going to clean up fully because I need to clean up the entire board anyway. I'll just get rid of a little bit of flux just to stop it from going all hard and stopping it from being able to be cleaned off easily. But I do need to clean the rest of the console at the end of the job anyway, whether or not it works this time. Rather than wasting new thermal paste, I usually just throw the board back into the chassis and give it a quick test, and if it works then great, I'll take it apart again, and if it don't then I haven't wasted any thermal paste. So like I said, I'm not going to replace the thermal paste yet because I don't want to basically waste the paste. So I'm just going to put it back in enough to just give it a quick test. If it works then I'll shut it straight down and then give the rest of the console a service. So if it doesn't turn on then I'll replace the chip. Okay, so let's just see what happens. And no, still no life from the console, so it's going to be replace the chip, which means I've got to reball it. Yay. Not. Not. It's not fun at all. Alright, so I'm going to pop this to one side for a minute. What I've got here is a PS4 Slim donor board. What I can do is I can take the safe bridge from this, replace the solder balls using a process called reballing, and then put that chip onto the board that I'm working on. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to take off this specific chip. And my flux has decided it wants to harden again. Never mind. Alright, and there's the replacement chip. I'll just pop the board to one side. And then what I need to do is just prep this chip and get it ready to go onto the board. So I'm going to pop the chip into a holder, just like this. There we go. And I'll pop into the microscope so I can show you what I'm going to do next. Okay, so as you can see here, this is a whole load of solder balls. And this is the ball grid array which I was referring to. So basically, this is a bunch of 0.5mm solder balls. And to be able to make a connection with the motherboard, we need to replace all of these balls. So what I'm going to do is add a bit of flux. There we go. And then I'm going to take some solder, so some leaded solder. So this, I believe, is lead-free solder on here. It might have been reballed in the past, I don't know. But I think it should be lead-free solder. So I'm going to replace all of that with leaded solder, and what that's going to do is lower the melting temperature required to wick it away. And that's going to allow me to wick it away safely and clean off the chip. We've got a few oxidised pads. And generally, if we just give them a little bit of a scrape with the iron, so a little bit of a gentle scraping, then that should bring the pads back. I hope it does, because these chips are expensive, which is why I haven't got any. Okay, so some of these pads are coming back now. If they don't come back the first time, don't sit there and keep trying to get them back. Just wick it away as you normally would, and then as you're going over it with the wick, sometimes it will scrape the pads enough to be able to bring them back with another run of leaded solder afterwards. So it takes a little bit longer, but we don't really want to be damaging pads, because once we damage the pads, it's pretty much GG at that point, for that chip at least. So what I'll do is just wick away. So I'll just use some solder braid. And after I've wicked away, I can clean it all off and then inspect those pads a little bit better, because I'll be able to see a lot better as well. So it's just in this top left corner where the issues are. Alright, so I'll clean that off using some isopropyl alcohol and a cotton swab. And now I can see a much clearer picture of what's going on with the chip. So up in this top left corner, you can see that we've got some really dull looking pads. This is basically oxidation, and we should be able to fix it. We've also got some pad exposure there as well, so we're going to need to sort that out. But if we just give these pads a little bit of a scrape with some tweezers. So there's a fair few here, it's not usually this bad. So usually we get 1 or 2, but not like 15 or so. Okay, so now that I've kind of exposed them a little bit, I can add some more flux here. And then running over it with the soldering iron and some leaded solder again should technically fix those pads. I certainly hope it does. Okay, so that looks a little bit rough, a little bit messy, but if we don't get those pads back, then we're not going to be able to use the chip. So let's just wick this away again, and let's see how it looks now. And I must say, that looks a million times better. A million times better. Let's just clean it off. And yes indeed. Okay, so like I said, we've got a little bit of damage here to this one pad. So if we just zoom in here, you can see a little bit of damage there. I think that pad's linked to the pad that I've just restored, I'm sure it is. Let's just see if we get continuity there. Yep. No continuity to that one next to it. So what we need to do is we need to protect this. It's basically the coating of the chip which has come off. So we're going to need to protect that, because if we don't protect it, then what's going to happen is when we go to basically put the solder balls on, it's going to cause the solder to overflow onto this point here. We don't want that, because that's going to make that one particular solder pad smaller than the rest of them, which will make it uneven, which will make it that point is not going to be making a contact with the motherboard. So what we want to do is just add a little bit of conformal coating to it to basically restore the part of the chip which is missing. So just a drop of conformal coating just there, and then what we'll do is we'll cure that using a UV pen, and that will basically bring it back to a usable state. So I've got a UV pen, it's actually a laser, that's going to allow me to cure this. I'm just showing it on there for around about 10 seconds, and when I let go, that should be nice and solid, and it should be nice and protected. Alright, so that should be nice and solid now. Should be pretty much ready to go. But I do want to just trim it down a little bit, just so that I can basically make sure that it's going to be nice and flat. So I'm going to get rid of the... Ah, damn it, it's come off. Well, that didn't work, did it? Never mind, I'll do it again. A little bit rough on that on my part. It's fine. I'll do it again. I shouldn't need to scrape it this time as well. Okay, here we go. So that's done. So what I need to do now is basically prep this ready to go back on the motherboard, or rather to go onto the board that I'm working on. So the first step for that is going to be to add a little bit of flux. And it might be wise if I zoom out a little bit there. So I'm going to add some flux, and then I'm just going to spread this flux out evenly. You don't want too much, but if I just spread this flux out evenly, and then I'm going to actually scrape a lot of that off, because we don't need that much. But if I spread out the flux so it's nice and even on the chip, then what that's going to do is it's going to allow the solder balls to actually stick to the chip. So now I'm going to sprinkle some solder balls on here. I'm going to make sure I've got enough. I don't want too little, but I don't mind having too many. There's around about 393 solder balls on here, on this chip. So I can have too many, but I just can't have too little, because I don't want to end up with a case where I've got to try and add solder balls afterwards. But what I need to do now is I need to place all of these solder balls onto each pad. So that's going to mean going in manually with each ball and just placing it onto the pad itself. So because I don't have a stencil to do this for me, I need to do it by hand. Generally for me, because I'm used to it, it takes me around about 20 minutes to do one of these chips. So it's going to take me a little while. I'm not going to make you guys sit through it. I am going to go and grab a fresh cup of coffee before I do it anyway. But what I'm going to do is basically just place all of these balls here. I'm going to grab a fresh pair of tweezers, because otherwise it's just going to stick to my tweezers. There's hairs and all sorts of gunk all over these tweezers. But that's basically what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be placing a solder ball on each pad, and then I'll solder them on using warm air, or rather hot air, but just a low airflow. So I'll fast forward through this process because it is time consuming, and I'll see you all on the other side. Right, okay, here we go. So this is done, finally. One of the issues with this is the fact that my solder balls, I spilt them all over my desk, and I don't have any more. So I've had to literally just leave them there where they are and just use them off the desk. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drop the airflow down to 1%. I'm going to keep it 420 degrees Celsius, but I'm going to drop the airflow down to 1%, and I'm just going to heat up this area, and I'm going to keep a close eye on the solder balls while I do it, because I don't want them to end up merging with other solder balls, because that would be a pain in the backside to fix. So I've got the hot air pretty far away as well. So even though it's at 1%, it's still fairly far away, because if I was to move it any closer, it would just blow the solder balls all over the place. I'm moving a little bit closer. You see some of these starting to move around a little bit. Okay, that right hand side where there was a little puddle, that's not going to cause an issue. Alright, I'm going to let that cool down. Alright, these few balls here in this corner are a little bit close to each other for my liking. So I could end up having to wick the corner away. Just give it a little bit of a helping hand and just push it back out of the way. But the majority of it has gone okay, I think. Okay, so it doesn't look like we've got any merging. Should be all good. And now I can add some flux. So I'm going to add some flux now, and then when I heat it up once more, it's going to pull everything into place. Hopefully nothing merges now. This is probably the most crucial part, because once it all flows now, that's going to be basically the end result. Then you're not going to be able to nudge any out of the way on the second flow. So I'll increase the airflow in a second and flow them all down fully. But that's going to be basically the last chance for the solder balls to end up merging. But also, if they do end up merging during this stage, then it's not going to be a case of just being able to nudge them with a pair of tweezers. I'm just going to add flux all over. Flux has gone fairly hard again. It is pretty cold at the minute. Seem to have lost a solder ball there. Not sure how. But in a minute I'm going to need to inspect the chip and just make sure that the solder ball's not ended up stray somewhere. So I'll increase my airflow to 10%, and then I'm just going to melt the flux so as I can see the chip. I don't want to flow the solder balls until I've found out where that solder board has gone. I think I can see it, I'm not sure. I think it's down here. Let's pop it back onto its pad, and I'll flow it down and just see if it wants to move out of place again. If it does, then I'm going to have to remove it and add it afterwards. There we go, that worked. So taking it slow. There's a ball just over here which I want to move over. Hopefully that doesn't jump and end up on another pad. We've actually got a couple up the top as well. Bit of a problem up in the top corner, where a couple of these balls have jumped off the pads. Okay. There's also one ended up there where there's not meant to be a solder ball. Not sure how. Alright, let's just see if these ones up in the top corner want to play up in a second. Yep, they do. Try again. And down here as well. I'm just going to get rid of that one. We've also got one down here. How's this ended up over here? Let's see if I can put that one there instead. Let's see if that wants to sit there. Come on. There we go. This one corner is still giving me a bit of an issue. Third row down, third row across. I'll deal with that in a minute. Let's just deal with this one here. Come on. Oh, I'm going to actually increase the airflow to 30%. Just see if he wants to jump in. There we go. And the one in the corner? Nope. That one wants to play up. After all I've done for it, just don't want to be my friend. Just going to give it a little bit of a helping hand there. Okay, I'm going to let that cool down. I think it's done. I'm just checking some random spots, make sure it's all cooled down. And it appears to have done. Alright, so what I'm going to do now then is just clean it with some isopropyl alcohol. Okay. And that seems okay. Good to go. Cool. Alright, so next I want to take off this south bridge that's on this board. So once again, I'm going to warm up my flux using some hot air. Just allow the flux to flow through properly. And I'm just going to add some more flux all around here. There we go. With the hot air set still at 420, at 40% airflow, I'm going to remove this chip. Drat. Right, okay, and somehow I've got a resistor missing here. So, when I took the chip off, it's taken this resistor with it, and I don't know where it's gone. So I'm going to have to try and figure something out. So try and figure out where it is, and if I can't find it, then I'm going to have to find one on a donor board. It's not too much of a big deal. So it could be on the end of the chip, it could be in this little clump of solder here. It could be pretty much anywhere. I believe it's just the one. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the solder that's on here with some leaded solder. And that's going to lower the melting temperature. And hopefully at the same time I'll find the resistor somewhere. But I don't think I'm going to. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to find that. And that's the only problem with working in such a tight area. There are a few risks involved with knocking the components off. But it's fine, I'm sure I'll find it, and if not, there'll be one on a donor board somewhere. Alright, so I've replaced the solder on there. I do need to wick it away, but I do want to see if I can find this resistor that's missing by looking on top of this chip. Ah, I can see it. It's right in the top corner. Okay, now I can see it. So the resistor has fixed itself to here. There we go. Okay, so that should flow down now. There we go. That's more like it. Alright, with that done, now I can concentrate on the south bridge. So I'm going to clean up this south bridge area. So the entire bridge area, I'm going to wick it away, and then I can just drop the chip straight on. Okay, that should be good. So I'm going to clean up using some IPA again. Just get rid of all of that flux. There we go. So that's ready now. So what I need to do is just grab the chip out of the chip holder. It's actually a board holder, but I use it for a chip holder as well. It's cool. And I'm going to add some flux before I drop the chip on. I'm not going to add much flux, I'm just going to add a nice layer. And then just spread it around. Someone asked me the other day, is it safe to touch flux with your fingers? I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it. If you care about long-term health, I wouldn't recommend it. I do care about long-term health, I'm just lazy, to be honest. We're going to get this chip lined up using the guides on the board. So in the corners there's some guides, as you can see. And we're going to drop the chip down. And I'm going to wiggle it about to make sure it doesn't budge. And if it doesn't budge, then it should be lined up. So time to get this chip soldered now. These empty pads here are no stuff, so don't worry about those. I'll just hit them with the wick. So 420 degrees Celsius, 40% airflow, and I'm going to flow this down. So I haven't got much flux on there at the minute because I don't want the chip to end up flying all over the place. I am also kind of holding it, but just not putting any pressure on it. I'll kind of hold the chip for a little while, just for the first 5 or 6 seconds. And just partially flow this down. And then once I've partially flowed it down, it shouldn't move when I add some more flux. So I can add as much flux as I want now, really. Okay, and then I'll just reflow it now to make sure it solders down. Still at 420, 40% airflow. And I'm looking now for the flux to suck underneath the chip and for the chip to kind of drop down. There we go. Perfect. Alright, and once the chip's cooled down a little bit, I can clean it up. So isopropyl alcohol, once again, give it a good scrub. And there we go. Job done. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Alright, so it's time to test it. Hopefully it's going to work now. So once again, I don't really want to waste any thermal paste. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it back together just enough to test it. I'm going to pop the board to one side actually for a second, just while I get rid of this solder, and also just dry up some of this isopropyl alcohol and flux concoction. And like I said, I don't really want to waste any thermal paste, so I'm going to just pop it into the housing, pop in essential things only. Don't really need the fan, but again, force of habit, I've just plugged it in. Never mind. So I've got the power button plugged in and the 5-volt connector. Don't technically need to sit the power supply down, but I'm going to anyway. And I'm just going to give it a brief test and just see if it turns on. Okay, here we go. Boom. It turns on. Let's go. Alright. So, now I need to replace the thermal paste. And then hopefully this console is going to work. And that's back together enough to test. So I'll get the HDMI cable as well. Here we go. So we've got a blue light. Disk drive don't appear to be spinning though. Okay, yeah, the disk drive don't appear to be spinning. We do get a white light. It's got FIFA 20 inside. And there we go, we do actually get a display. So I'm going to wait for this to boot into the dashboard and then I'll try the disk drive again. Okay, so we've got the PlayStation logo, as you can see. Yeah, the disk drive's not working. Interesting. Okay. Right, so if the disk drive's not working, then I'm going to need to figure out why. So the question is it going to be the disk drive or is it going to be the motherboard? And I can find that out fairly quickly because I've got a test housing with a disk drive in for this specific model, which I can use. And I can just drop the board straight into there and that will give me confirmation on what's wrong. So like I said, I've got a test housing right here which I can use with exactly the same power supply in, exactly the same disk drive, except I know that everything on this housing works. So this is just going to give me a confirmation of what's going on, whether it's going to be the disk drive or whether it's going to be the motherboard itself. Let's just flip this round a minute. Turn that on. Have I plugged the fan in? No. Okay, okay. So now I can figure out what's going on. Let's give a test disk. Yeah. It's the disk drive. Okay. So I know the disk drive is faulty. That's a good thing about having test parts available to hand. But now I know that the disk drive is faulty, I can look into it, and if I have to, then I can always replace the deck. And I do have a working disk drive here. So basically, in a situation like this where I fix the primary issue and then we come across another issue, a lot of the time what I tend to do is not add any labour on to, for example, replace the deck, because if I don't get this fully working, then technically I can't really charge. So what I would do is I would just add parts cost. So I would price up what it would cost me to get a replacement, and then I would basically just charge that for the extra work. I'm a nice guy like that. So I've got a feeling that this could well have been dropped, and that could have caused the initial issue with the south bridge. So I need to take these screws out of here, and then I can flip it around. Take the plate off and get to the disk drive. Alright, so let's just take a quick look here and see what's going on. Whoops, I forgot this screw. Bit of a jump cut there as well. Had to give my son a good night kiss. Here we go. Okay, so let's just see what's going on with this then. So the motor seems to spin. And the mechanism is perfectly fine. So I'm going to say that this entire section is going to need replacing. It's actually just this part here which would probably need replacing, but I'm going to be replacing the entire mechanism. But what I'm going to do, rather than stripping this disk drive down and wasting time, I'm just going to replace the entire disk drive, and then I've got this one for parts. So I'll pop the customer's disk there. Everything's a little bit of a mess right now. Never mind. So what I'll do is, rather than sitting there faffing around with disk drives, risking damaging the disk drive in this one, etc, etc, it's a lot better for me to just basically replace the entire drive. And I'll still charge the customer a normal cost, so I'll still charge them the cost of just the mechanism itself, but it just saves me wasting time stripping it down. So to strip it down and actually get that mechanism out, I need to take this top off, which is an extra 5 or 6 screws. Then I'm going to take the old one out, put the new one in, line it all up so as the ribbon is lined up, and it's just generally a pain in the backside, so it's just much easier for me to replace the entire unit, and then I'll just keep the other one for spare parts. And again, I'm just going to put it back enough just to turn the thing on and be able to use it. And then once I've finished the video, I'll be able to put it back together fully. So I'll just put a few screws in. So this is the reason that we don't put it fully back together, because if I'd have had to sit there and take out all of these screws again, I'm wasting another 15 minutes. Probably not 15 minutes, but pretty close. And we don't need the antenna, just for a partial test. Once I've screwed everything back down, I will make sure it all works, but we should be good now. I'm presuming this could have been dropped, to be honest with you, just given the amount of damage there was, or the amount of issues. Okay, so turn it on. And there's a disc in there, that's my disc, I believe. But it is spinning. I'm going to get that disc out. There we go, so FIFA 17, that's mine. Pop the customer's disc back in. Give it a test. Alright, so while I'm waiting for that to boot, I'm just going to grab a USB cable. Okay, we're getting orange light on my controller. And it syncs as well, so that's all working. So now I'll just make sure that it boots to the dashboard, make sure it reads that disk with this new disk drive laser and disk drive mechanism, and it should be good to go. Alright, it's lost its sync for some reason. I think my batteries are dead. Oh no, it hasn't. I haven't got the antenna in. Yeah, that might help. Let's just take a look. FIFA 20. Let's ignore HDR. Yep, there we go. And this console appears to be working. So like I said, I still need to do a barrage of tests. So there's going to be a test sheet which I need to run through just to make sure everything works okay. But as you can see, it's loaded the game. It seems to be working absolutely fine. A little bit of a weird flicker on the screen now. I'm not sure what that was, but if there is another issue, then I'll get to do another video. Yay! But never mind. Anyway, yeah, this is done. So obviously this came in for no power, and by doing a couple of tests around the south bridge, turned out that that was the fault. On top of that, bonus little repair there by replacing the disk drive as well, and hopefully this console is going to live to fight another day. So that's going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you do have any comments or questions, leave them down in the comment section down below. I'll always do my best to answer. If you want to organise your own repair, you can do so by getting in touch using the website address in the video description. And you can book the console in, you can check out the price lists, or you can use the contact page as well if you want to get in touch with me to ask me a question about the repair. If you enjoy this type of content and you want to see more, then don't forget to subscribe and turn on bell notifications, that way you don't miss any future videos. And if you want to support what I do, then there'll be a Patreon link in the video description. There'll be a channel sponsorship button down below the video, so you can click on the join button and become a channel member. Or you can head over to Twitch and link your Amazon account to Twitch, and that way you can subscribe for free, which supports me, but it doesn't cost you anything extra on top of your normal Amazon Prime. But that's going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, I'll see you later. Bye for now.